Hello and welcome to another episode of Earth911's Sustainability in Your Ear. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe, and we've got a really interesting interview today. It's with Hannah Bacon. She's a 27-year-old who lost her job recently due to the pandemic at an environmental nonprofit in New York. She took a trip to California, and on the trip to California, she happened to read David Wallace-Wells' The Uninhabitable Earth, and it really shook her. So she has decided to walk home rather than use a plane or drive back, adding to her carbon footprint. And so we're talking to Hannah today from Tularosa, New Mexico. She's about a third of the way across the country after 2 months. Hannah, how are you doing and how are your feet?
I am well. Thank you so much for having me on. The feet went through a lot of trauma, I should say, at the beginning, but now they're doing a lot better that I've gotten into a routine. So I'm taking a couple of rest days here in Tularosa, but I'm doing well.
Good. Well, and now how far have you walked so far?
Just over 1,000 miles. I think yesterday I got to about 1,015.
Wow. Now, that's an incredible statement in and of itself, because you just started this on November 21st. That's an awful long way to walk in 2 months. Now, you've spoken about your concerns about climate change really coming into focus during this trip. And what was it in particular that shook you so much that you wanted to do this and make a statement?
Yeah, I have cared about climate change and the environment for a long time. I grew up in a family that was very connected to nature. And so I've always been a nature lover, and I was working in the environmental field. But something about reading The Uninhabitable Earth while I was on a plane for total non-essential travel, I was really just thinking about my carbon footprint in a way that was different than I had before, because when I was working, before I lost my job, I was working for a nonprofit that was helping schools in New York City become zero waste. So I was doing my best to not eat meat and to recycle and compost and to buy as little as possible. So I thought I was doing as much as I possibly could be doing. And maybe in that moment I was, as I was working full time and all of that. But I think it was this flight and thinking about my travel, even though I was recycling, composting, doing these other things, I was also traveling for non-essential reasons. I used to always love road trips. So I think it was a part of my life that I hadn't really adjusted yet. And I saw room for improvement.
And I think what you're saying is echoing what a lot of people are experiencing as they look at how the pandemic has shattered all our assumptions about how life works. Yeah. And so as you think about this, as a young person walking across the United States, you've got a lot of time to think about this. What do you think the generational differences are? And what are you seeing on the road when you talk to older people who may not have been educated in an environment like you just described in New York, where they are actually focused on net zero?
Yeah, I think, well, for the first part of that question, the generational differences, I think that people my age and younger really see it as a crisis, and it is more generally accepted. And on the road, older folks, it's been really interesting because I've been in a lot of small towns with, varying political views. But generally what I've found, with a few exceptions, is that whether or not people like to call it climate change, because I think that makes people kind of, that term can be triggering to folks who might be more conservative. But generally, people understand that they're experiencing drought. I've been in the Southwest, and people understand that there might not be enough water, or they're in cities without clean air, or there's been serious heat waves. So I actually have experienced a lot of positivity around that conversation. But with the older generation, a lot of times I try to avoid saying the phrase climate change.
Well, let's talk just about the practicalities of what you're doing. So how are you living light on the land during this trip? Where do you stay?
Yeah, I mostly have been camping, either at real campgrounds. Real campgrounds are great because then I have a bathroom and a shower usually. But a lot of times it's BLM land. a few times I have camped just behind people's houses, like in backyards, friendly people that I meet. I've camped behind a gas station with, I checked with the owners first, and some kind of random places like that. But I've also been able to meet some nice folks who might have an extra room in their house, or, a separate area that they'll allow me to stay in. So I generally try to camp, but once in a while, especially if it's cold or a really cold night, some folks will invite me in.
So where would you say the most interesting places you've stopped are?
That I've slept or stopped in general?
Well, either one. I mean, you're on the road.
Yeah. Well, my favorite place has been going through the Chiricahua Mountains in southeastern Arizona. Just such a beautiful place with a really interesting and kind of intense history from the native Apache that lived in that area. That has been my most favorite place. But I've been able to get to know a lot of different people. I camped near a Greek monastery one night, Greek Orthodox monastery, and got to know the folks there. That was really interesting and different than anything I'd experienced. A few different religious places, a Thai temple I camped at, and got to learn about the Thai Buddhism that they practice. So interesting religious experiences, I would say.
And how are you sharing the message about sustainability and climate change as you travel?
A lot of talks such as this. I've been lucky to have interviews and been able to talk to folks in this way. But a lot of it is just conversations on the ground and connecting with people, kind of like I was saying earlier, that folks who might be more conservative generally would be afraid to have this sort of conversation. But because I'm face to face with folks, just, walking down the road, or people ask me what I'm doing, I think I'm able to connect with people on a more personal level and kind of show that it doesn't need to be, it shouldn't be a political issue. It should be an issue that we all can care about and all have in common.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree. It's not a political issue. And a lot of the times we just start with that. But let me ask it a little more pointed way. What do you say when somebody says, what are you doing?
Oh, yeah. Well, just the most direct question, I tell them that I'm walking across the country for climate change. And if a lot of times they'll be like, wow, that's great, and ask some follow-up questions. Sometimes people will be like, climate change, you're wasting your time. It's too late to make a difference for that. And then I can get into a conversation about, well, it's not too late and we all should care, and this is our home. So that's kind of how the conversation usually goes.
So have you seen what you would describe as aspects of nature that are already on the verge of being lost while you're walking through it?
I have seen a lot of drought. And of course, that has to do with the southwestern route that I've been taking. But a lot of folks that I've talked to have talked about the drought and the heat waves. So I wouldn't say I'm an expert on the desert scenery and landscape and plants, even though I've been trying to learn. But I've been able to talk to some folks about how the drought is affecting just creatures in this area and the human impact of drought in places like Phoenix and Tucson. So I would say that has been the most extreme in terms of like on brink of changing.
I have to ask, because it's been snowing in places like Phoenix or Las Vegas and so forth. Are you seeing snow as you travel in wintertime?
I actually just saw snow for the first time about 2 days ago. So I hadn't seen rain or really anything, except maybe a tiny drizzle about a week ago. But just 2 days ago, there got snow in the mountains out here. I haven't really passed through it. I was walking through a little dusting of snow when I was coming out of Las Cruces, a few days out of Las Cruces, New Mexico. So in the next 2 or 3 days, I'll be heading over these mountains that I'm near right now and should be going through some snow. But I've been pretty warm and I guess pretty lucky in that sense of not walking through it. Yeah.
So now you're doing this to raise money for the Sunrise Movement, which is a youth-oriented environmental action nonprofit. Were you involved with them before you started the trip?
I wasn't. I've always liked what they've what they've done, and I've kept up with them. But I was not involved. And when I decided to do this, I was thinking about where I wanted to direct the funds and, thought about a bunch of different organizations. But I chose Sunrise because they are youth-led, and I think that that's important to listen to young folks. And the fact that they're national, they have hubs all over the country. So I figured that with this fundraising, at least some of the funds would go to each of the communities that I'm walking through, as they have locations in every state. And most importantly, I'm a huge supporter of a Green New Deal, and that's what they've been fighting for and continue to fight for right now. So those were kind of the main reasons why I chose Sunrise.
Well, they have 12 principles, and we won't try to rehearse them all here, but there were 3 that really stood out for us as we were looking at this, because it's all about healing this nation and actually healing the planet and bringing us back together with a common purpose. But Sunrise is clearly looking at this as a holistic problem, not just we have to fix the climate. So the 3 that we liked were stop climate change while creating millions of good-paying jobs. You just mentioned the Green New Deal. Mm-hmm. To be nonviolent in word and deed, which is just absolutely essential to our finally solving some of our problems, and the fight for the liberation of all people. Now, how do you bring people together? We've a couple of times already talked about folks who get triggered by climate change as a term, but what do you say to people who blow off your concerns? How do you try to bring them into the conversation? You mentioned sharing personal stories. What kind of things wake people up, so to speak?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought up that point of unifying. I love to talk about our children because most people do have kids or grandkids. And I think something that I haven't talked about yet is a huge point and sense of urgency is for me is that I have 2 nieces and I have a history of teaching. So I care deeply about young folks. And that's something that most people can get behind is thinking about their children. So when people kind of laugh it off or aren't taking the emergency seriously, I like to bring up our kids and just say things like, well, we all want an earth that our children can thrive on. We all want our kids to breathe clean air and have clean water to drink, because those are things that are really relatable. And talking about health, everyone goes through health and wants their kids to be healthy. So talking about young folks, I found can be a really great point to bring people together.
So do you ask somebody, do you have grandchildren or children that you're concerned about? Is that how you get them started talking?
Well, usually I say I have 2 nieces, and I think that kind of opens the door. And then from there, if they don't volunteer, a lot of times folks will say, oh, I have grandkids, I have kids. If they don't volunteer, I'll be like, oh, do you have nieces, kids of your own? And that'll lead to it.
Right. So again, a common topic, and then you have a basis for conversation. That's great. Now, when you're talking with folks about reducing your carbon footprint, and boy, you're making a big sacrifice to reduce yours, what kind of actions do you suggest they take to reduce their carbon footprint on a day-to-day basis?
On a day-to-day basis, well, the first thing I always lead with is reducing travel, since I am traveling by foot. So just driving less. And I know it's a privilege to be able to reduce travel because, most people have to drive far to work, especially out here when they're small towns. Yep. But I like to talk about making less trips to the grocery store, trying to get everything all in one go if you have to go out and go shopping, or just limiting travel for fun, carpooling to work if that's an option, or to the store, seeing if your neighbors need things on your way driving anywhere, and limiting flying, unless you're flying for essential reasons. So I do often lead with travel. And then from there, I talk a lot about eating less meat. And that's something that is also can be a touchy subject, but sure. I find that if you just say, if you eat meat every day, try to take it out twice a week and start there, because that seems like a chewable action step. And then beyond that, a lot of towns out here don't have recycling, like widespread city recycling, which is tough. But a lot of people out here are farmers or ranchers. So something like composting, it doesn't need to be citywide. It's something that folks can do on their own. And a lot of folks already do practices like that when they have so much land out here. So that's a cool topic to get into. And I like to talk about just buying less stuff because we're such consumers in this country. We have such a culture of buying things. I really like to just talk to people about living smaller.
And when you talk about living smaller, how do people react to that? Because one of the things I find as we talk about this is folks believe that that means living less. But clearly, I mean, the time that you're getting to think and look at this country while you walk is a gift that most people wouldn't count. How do you get them to think about the fact that that can be a richer, more fulfilling way to live?
Well, kind of like the same topic as bringing up my nieces is just, I like to laugh a lot with people. So I think a big part of it is talking about my backpack that, it's been 2 months. For the next 5-ish months, I have everything I need right in here. And it's kind of it's a fun thing for people to ask questions about, like, oh, how do you do this? How do you do that? And I'm like, well, I have everything I need right on my back. And when I'm living not on the road, I try to use as little as possible also. So I kind of just start by laughing with folks, and they have questions about, food and bathroom and all these things. And I'm like, well, I realized that I really need very little to live. And just by talking about my own day-to-day life and how I'm getting by with so few material things, it lets them think about, what they're doing in their everyday life, even if it's not going to be groundbreaking. But I think just having the conversation of, yeah, it's totally doable to not buy this or that.
So you're a walking object lesson.
Yeah, exactly.
That's cool. Now, you've got an Instagram at instagram.com, Miles for Climate. You've got a blog, milesforclimate.org. We talked about the Sunrise Movement, but you have a GoFundMe page so people can back you and back Sunrise. It's at gofundme.com, whack miles-for-climate. That's the word for. How much money have you raised so far, and what do you encourage people to do to support you?
Great question. We've raised, last time I checked, it was about $13,500. So feeling really great about that. And even though I'm using the GoFundMe platform, that's just to see how much the walk has raised. All of those proceeds are going to be donated to Sunrise. And folks can donate through there on GoFundMe. You can get to that link either from the blog or from the Miles for Climate Instagram. And in addition to donating, you can share with your friends. That's really helpful. Just share with people in your life and reach out. I love hearing from folks. So send me an email or message me on either the Instagram or blog, and I would love to have a conversation. And I also am always looking for safe places to camp. So I like to post here and there about where I'll be in the coming weeks. Okay. And if folks happen to have friends along the route with a backyard that I can camp in, that's really helpful, especially in some of these big open stretches. So I'll be headed kind of northeastern New Mexico, and then through the panhandle of Texas. That's what's on the horizon.
Well, great. I'm glad to hear people are working together with you to plan this trip. That's an amazing thing about the time we live in. So let me ask this: how are you going to celebrate when you finish this hike?
I'm going to jump into the Atlantic and kind of bask in that for a while. And I want to hang out with my nieces. I miss them a lot, and my family. Mostly just, spending time with the people I love and letting it sit. I'm sure I have a lot of thinking time during the day, but I also have a lot of go time trying to find where I'm going to camp and trying to stay safe on the road. So I think just having the time to sit with it all is going to be important.
It sounds like it'd be great for folks to be able to donate audiobooks to you.
Oh my gosh. Yes. If anyone If you have an audiobook, send along.
We'll have to set up something with Audible where they can send them to you.
Yeah.
Well, hey, Hannah, this has been a really inspiring conversation. Any last words for our listeners about what they should be thinking about today?
Thank you so much for that question. And just remember that we all have the power to make a difference individually and working together. The power of community is so strong, and it's just important to not get apathetic and to remember that we can make a difference, and it's our home, and we all need to be there for each other and for our planet. So just remember that you have the power, and that's the most important thing.
Words to live by. I want to thank you, Hannah. Folks, that was Hannah Bacon. She is walking across the United States to raise money for the Sunrise Movement. That's at sunrisemovement.org. But you want to go check her out at milesforclimate.org. That's her blog. She's got some amazing photos of her feet, by the way, and she's taking good care of them. But walking that far is not easy. And her Instagram is at instagram.com/Miles for Climate, all one word, and with 4 spelled out. We'll be back with another innovator interview soon. In the meantime, this is Earth 911's Sustainability in Your Ear. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe, and we're going to take care of the Earth, take care of one another, and let's all take care of ourselves for a little bit, too. Take care. We'll see you soon.